Alright, ready to go? It's time for the patch breakdown. We are now in patch 1.21, and we are ever so close to patch 2, which I assume is what it will be called. But in any case, we know the name of the upcoming set. It is called Omens of the Past. And we have our first card sort of from that set, but rather a promo card to tide us over as we wait for it. It looks like it will be launching in July and not in June as originally anticipated. However, we will start spoiler week as soon as Monday, the 17th, 18th, 19th? 19th? 19th sounds right. Yeah, Monday the 19th. And there will be stuff everywhere. I think it will probably be up on RNG Eternal first. We will see. But yeah, should be some cool promo cards and stuff coming up. Really excited to find out what's going on. And I have no idea where all the spoilers are going, but I'm hoping that we get to see a bunch of them. In any case, patch 2 is not out yet. So Omens of the Past is not here yet, but we are getting ready for it. And we've gotten ready for it in a really exciting fashion. So first things first. The notes, and then we'll talk about the card. The notes are not that impressive at the moment. There are a bunch of minor client fixes, some settings menu changes, weapons correctly granting aegises and transferring aegises when the unit transforms, which is just a thing that apparently happened. Life gain is now batched into single triggers rather than individual instances. For example, Black Sky Harbinger will just give you one giant goblet of health instead of multiple instances of +1. That doesn't seem particularly relevant at the moment, but it could end up being relevant for like we know that there's some sort of life gain effect in the set. I think we are pretty sure of that. There was some discussion of it in patch 1, so it seems pretty likely that that is something that is happening. In any case, damage spells should now correctly consume the aegises from units that are invulnerable to damage, even if they would have dealt no damage to the unit. So it's kind of a the reverse of what would happen if you tried to stun a unit that has endurance, which just can't be stunned. Interesting interaction there. I'm a little curious as to why that change was made, but that's the only gameplay changes. The rest of these are just minor bugs. Zindel apparently had 4 different bugs, and one of the ones that is probably kind of important is that he now correctly increases max power when the Tormentor enters the Void from Whispers in the Void. And basically, anytime that units move between voids, Zindel is going to correctly increase maximum power, which is pretty important for the Whispers in the Void decks with the Zindel. He's a really fun card in general, so that's all delightful. But that's not the exciting thing about this patch. The exciting thing is the events button. We have unique timed events coming up in the future in which basically we will have some function where we can actually play in cool events. They're going to be testing those this weekend, so we will be seeing some events soon. I believe this will include tournaments. It is hard to say exactly what's going to happen, but we'll be seeing those in just a moment. And finally, there is the promo card, and the promo card, actually pretty exciting. Got lambasted on the Reddit today because people have a pretty interesting knee-jerk reaction to, there we are, to randomness associated cards. However, this card is really cool for reasons that aren't related necessarily just to its design, but more related to what it does and how it affects meta. Basically, that is the thing that's like really interesting to look at when you're looking at this card, is not necessarily how am I going to play it, although that is certainly something that we're going to be considering, but more a question of like, what does this do to the meta? What happens when this card exists? So, Veteran Mercenary is a 5-cost 6/4. That stat line is mediocre to good. It's not amazing. It definitely is a pretty weak stat line for a card that costs 5 or more. Like, most of the 5-drops have at least 5 health, but that 6 attack is actually a little bit above average, I think. Like, most of the 5-drops are also just 5/5s in general, so this one's just a little bit unbalanced, and not in a way that necessarily disfavors it. There's not that many things that deal 4 damage versus things that deal 5 damage. It does make it a little bit more vulnerable to certain combo effects, but for the most part, Veteran Mercenary is still pretty durable for a 5-drop. Not amazing, but okay. And the thing that's fun, of course, is that he, if you have only one type of influence when you play him, you draw a random card of the faction in which you have influence. So this is pretty cool for a variety of reasons. We've played Nyctotraxian control decks before, so we know that this drawing a random card of the faction thing is actually pretty good. Like being able to pick up a card in a somewhat controlled fashion that is also a card, just an extra card for playing a card, means this card always cantrips itself in a way that is random, but usually delightful. So Veteran Merc is actually providing a decent amount of stats per 5. And he's providing that in colorless, which is traditionally very, very weak. But also he is giving you an extra card just for free. So that's pretty exciting, especially just like it just does a lot of cool things. And the main thing that it does is it is an interesting card to push monocolored decks, because you would never play Veteran Mercenary in a non-monocolored deck. And that's actually kind of the thing that I really like about this design, is that it is a card that fits in all colors, but actually only fits in a very specific range of decks, which is something that you kind of want out of the colorless effects. You don't want powerful colorless effects to be playable by all decks. You want them to be sort of things that fit into particular circumstances, or maybe just like support cards that are more associated with one particular archetype. In this case, the archetype is monocolored decks, which is the faction pairings, or like, in fact, we talk about faction pairings so often that I actually said faction pairings, but the factions that see the least play in Eternal. There's a really even division between all of the different faction pairings in Eternal, and it's going to get better as Set 2 comes out. We're going to see a lot of support for the opposing color pairs. There are already some good Argenport decks, some good Huru decks, some good Xenon decks, very few good Skycrag decks, but a few that are trying really hard, and some Praxis token decks. The mono decks, however, only red and yellow really have a lot of strength at the moment. And Veteran Mercenary is something that aims to change that by giving you a new option to play a monocolored deck. As Set 2 comes out, it's also going to make the option of building really cheap popper decks pretty interesting. So if you're picking up the game like for the first time and you're getting Veteran Mercenary as like your early copies, and then you also get the Set 2 cards, it's actually really easy to build a nice, simple solo color deck, I think. I think there should be a pretty decent option for setting up a deck with Veteran Merc in it and getting some real value out of that card. So yeah, the random card of the faction, there are certain factions in which that will be better or worse. It's hard to evaluate which is better or worse. I suspect that in red it will be less likely to be quite as strong. Red tends to have some pretty weak cards, but it does have an awful lot of burn. So Veteran Merc is a card that, with its 6/4 body, might actually be pretty solid in that setup. In time, I think Veteran Merc is probably at its strongest. He has good interactions with Talir, and Talir is a card that interacts very well with purely monocolored cards. Justice has a lot of really reliable units that can be played. You're likely to hit things like Steadfast Deputy and other things that might be a little bit on the weak side, but having a little bit of extra card advantage in Justice is pretty handy. In Primal, this card is trickier. I'm not sure how that's going to play out. It sort of depends on really what you're doing. You already got card advantage in Primal, so you're not really in need of a 5-cost 6/4. That may be the weakest faction in which Merc can be played. And what am I missing here? Time, Primal, Fire, Justice, Shadow. Shadow cards can probably do some things with this. There are a lot of interesting removal cards in Shadow, so if you play this, you actually have a higher than average chance of drawing good removal, or any removal, and any removal is usually going to be good against something, which means you'll get a decent amount of board advantage out of Veteran Merc. He also would be played in a mono Shadow deck, which means you can enable Devouring Shadow, which is a card that doesn't see a lot of play right now, but would be very good in a control archetype deck that is pushing with cards like Veteran Merc. So we're going to try a bunch of those different things out and see how he plays. I'm not sure if he's a good card yet. I think, however, he does push the meta in interesting ways, and he's going to encourage even more diversity than Eternal already has, so I'm excited for that. And that's my summary of this current patch. Let's go play with some Veteran Merc.